Does your reaction time absolutely suck in Counter-Strike 2? Are you tired of getting outgunned in those split-second showdowns? Well, fear not, because today we've got the solution for you. Today, you're going to learn how to write your very own Triggerbot from scratch in C++, helping you climb the ranks and destroy your enemies without even trying. But how does the Triggerbot that we're going to write actually work? Well, first we find our player in the game's memory. Then we see if we are looking at another player, determine if this other player that we are looking at is an enemy, and then force an in-game attack. Once your Visual Studio is open, hit clone a repository, copy and paste the link in the description to my external cheat-based repository, and hit clone. Now that your solution is open, press the 3 squares in the top right corner to show all files and create 2 new folders. Call one folder SDK and the other cheats. Inside of your SDK folder, create 2 files, client_dll.h as well as offsets.h. Next, inside of your cheats folder, create 2 files, triggerbot.h and triggerbot.cpp. Next, navigate to the other GitHub link in the description to the A2X dumper and open the generated folder. Then, copy paste the contents of client.dll.hpp into client_dll.h in our solution, as well as copy the contents of offsets.hpp into our own offsets.h file. Now, head to the triggerbot.h file. First, we're going to include our memory header for reading and writing our processor's memory, as well as we're going to want to include both of the files in our SDK folder, offsets.h and client_dll.h. Now, create our Triggerbot namespace with 2 inline uint pointers called procid and module base, which will store the process ID of CS2 as well as the module base address of client.dll. Finally, create a function called execute, which is where we will write our Triggerbot code. Now, open up your triggerbot.cpp file. First, include triggerbot.h, and then we're going to want to create a new function called execute, which is in the Triggerbot namespace. Inside this function, first we're going to want to read our local player pointer, which is found at the module base plus the DW local player pawn offset. And next we're also going to want to read the team of our local player, which is found at the local player plus the iteam_num offset. Next, we can read the entity list pointer by reading the module base plus the DW entity list offset. Next, we're going to want to read our crosshair entity index, which is found at the local player plus the m_id ent index. What this does is it reads the entity index of any entity that we are currently looking at in game, and then we check if it's less than 0, because if it's less than 0, it means that we're not looking at an entity. Effectively, what this check does is it checks to make sure if we are looking at enemy or not, as well as giving us the index of the entity which we are able to read from the entity list. Now we can read the entity list to find the entity we are looking for. First, we must find the list entry from within the entity list at the index of the entity we are trying to find using some bit manipulation. Then we use that list entry to find the exact entity pointer of the entity ID that we have. But what do we need this entity pointer for? Well, first we must do a team check by reading the entity plus the C-base entity m_iteam_num offset and comparing it to the one of our local player. This makes sure that we're not using our Triggerbot against any of our teammates. Next, we must read the entity plus the iHealth offset, and this makes sure that our entity is still alive. Next, we are going to write at our force attack address in client.dll, with the plus attack command being at hex 10001 or 65,537. We must also sleep for 5 seconds to account for in-game delay before cancelling our plus attack command with a minus attack command to prevent spam. Finally, we must sleep for another 5 seconds to avoid our thread taking up too much CPU, as well as giving time for our game to catch up. Now, head to our main.cpp file. First, delete everything within the winmain file as this content is not needed for this video. Then, replace the include at the top to be cheats/triggerbot.h to include our Triggerbot header file. Now, we're going to want to set our Triggerbot process ID to be equal to the process ID of csgo using our memory functions in our memory namespace. Next, we will find the module base address of client.dll from the CS2 process ID using the getModuleBaseAddress function, which is found in our memory namespace. Now, create a while loop which runs as long as the user does not press F9, and then call the Triggerbot execute function to execute our Triggerbot, and finally return 0 outside of this loop. Then feel free to switch to release mode and compile. Before launching your cheat, make sure to include the -insecure flag when you launch CS2 to disable the anti-cheat, and as you can see, once we are in game, the second our crosshair moves over an enemy head, it shoots automatically for us without us having to click manually.